Hello, all you positive heads out there. It's so good to be back with all you beautiful reflections of the one source consciousness that creates and animates all things. If you're new to this podcast, of course, we are super happy to have you here, and we just ask that you bring an open mind and heart to your listening experience and to be prepared to explore vantage points that I'm convinced will help shift or solidify your current understanding of the ultimate nature of reality in a way that is extremely empowering. Speaking of exploring powerful perspectives, I'm super excited to announce the release of my very first book, The Golden Key: Modern Alchemy to Unlock Infinite Abundance. If you're ready to alchemize the circumstances in your life so that your abundance expands to an entirely new level in 2021, head over to goldenkey.gift to download the audio or ebook as my gift to you by using the code POSITIVEHEAD. All right, all you positive heads. On this week's Soul Share episode, I'm very excited to have Matthew John here with me on the show. Matthew is a spiritual teacher and intuitive healer who is going to dive into the depths of our souls on this episode to discuss the fascinating nuances of soul contracts and past life karma. Super excited to dive into all this. Hey there, Matthew. Welcome to the show, my friend.
Hey, Brendan. Thank you for having me. This is super exciting. First time on your show. I'm really excited. Thank you.
Yeah. You came as a recommendation from a mutual dear friend. And so usually those pan out very well. So I like to follow those breadcrumbs. And in such a fun, cool topic that, you know, as I said, there's so much nuance there. And I have so many thoughts and ideas around this topic, and I wrote about some of them in my book, The Golden Key. And so I'm really excited to dive in and hear some of your thoughts and perspectives on it. Before we go too deep down the rabbit hole, I would like to start with my cliche opening question. And it is this. You're in an elevator. The woman next to you looks over, says, "What's your passion?" You have 10 floors to answer. What do you say?
My passion is helping people discover the most important things about them, who they are, who their soul is, where they came from other lifetimes, what their purpose is in this lifetime. That's what I would say.
Very, very cool. So such an interesting, I think, the whole idea of past lives, parallel lives, depending on how you're looking at it, right? If we're floating in eternity now, right now, and it's all happening on another channel, as I like to say. It's just such a fascinating thing. And it's so interesting. And, I can't wait to get my hands on the Akashic records and be able to have full, no barriers, no human to spirit, static, to really be able to clearly see and understand, who we've all been and who we've been to each other,
Right. And the cool thing is, we don't have to wait until we're off the planet and, before we can fully dive into the Akashic records. We can,
right.
Through, the best way is really through hypnosis, which is one of my passions. One of the favorite things that I do for clients is leading them on past life regression sessions through hypnosis. And
as we record this, it's funny because from time to time on the daily shows that I do that are just myself, I'll feel inspired to, instead of kind of talking about a perspective or idea or thought or, whatever's coming up for me in my own life, I feel like a little reading time. And so I always want to read something that's easy to, no matter where if you just happen to listen to that episode, you didn't have to hear like every chapter previously. And so, and something that of course is relevant and interesting. Yesterday, I felt like doing, and I do this probably once a month or so on my daily shows, every 2 months. And yesterday, I just read a few cases from Destiny of Souls by Michael Newton. So I'm sure you're very familiar with that.
Yes, a classic, yes.
So, why don't we start with you sharing?
By the way, speaking of books, the topic that we're going to be delving into today about life plans and about past lives, which is one of the things I'm most passionate about, like you asked me that question. The book that really inspired me was Your Soul's Plan by Robert Schwartz. So I
Okay.
was at a really dark time in my life about 5, 6 years ago, and a dark night of the soul, really. And I was
Huh.
just looking to understand why I was going through such difficulties and what the point is. And I stumbled across Robert Schwartz's book, Your Soul's Plan. And that's what gave me the impetus to go down this path of discovering this work and eventually doing my soul plan readings and getting back to doing past life regressions again and really making it my whole kind of research project, so to speak, to figure out what the life plan is, to figure out how past life karma and past lives play into the present lifetime. So yeah, that book I highly recommend. That was the gateway for me. Your
Interesting.
Soul's Plan by Robert Schwartz.
I'm
And
not
he wrote
familiar with that
another
one.
one. Yeah, yeah, and then
Cool.
he wrote another one, Your Soul's Gift. There might even be a third, if I'm not mistaken. But yeah, those books.
Very, very cool. Yeah, I'm sure some people will check those out. And
Hmm.
yeah, thanks for throwing that out there. Um, what I would love for you to do before we fully dive in is give whatever insight, backstory that you feel to your backstory that you feel is relevant for people to kind of understand, who you are, who you've been,
Yeah,
how you
sure,
got here.
sure. I grew up a relatively like normal. I mean, I guess I wasn't really ever normal, but I was relatively normal. I was extremely intelligent, extremely good at school. Like they had me doing like 12th grade math and fourth grade or something
Oh,
ridiculous
wow.
like that. I had tutors. Like, so I was extremely intelligent with my left brain. And, my mom was very spiritual. I didn't really have too much um, experience like going more into the right brain stuff. But, once in a while on family vacations, my mom would kind of open that portal for me a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And I was really an atheist, up until the age of about, I don't know, 22, 23. I was a full on atheist. My father's an atheist.
Mm.
I just, it didn't make logical sense. The whole God thing just seemed pretty silly.
Mm-hmm.
Just when you're a kid and, unless you're growing up in like some sort of new age community, which some kids are now, but most of what our reference points to God is like Christianity and Judaism.
Mm-hmm.
My father's side of the family and half my mother's side of the family are Jewish, but I would go to when I was, like a kid and a teenager, my friends would, their families were like super Jewish, and you'd go over Friday night and put on your yarmulke and do Shabbat dinner.
Yeah.
Um, but I always thought it was just so stupid. Like I thought the prayers and everything. I thought Hanukkah was cool because you got presents. Christmas was cool
Right.
because you got presents. But I thought it was all so stupid.
Mm.
The turning point for me, really, like when I shifted from that atheism towards, wow, there actually is something here, was a mushroom trip that I did,
Mm.
where it was completely unintentional too. I wasn't, you know, I have a
You
lot
weren't
of
seeking a
clients,
spiritual experience
not at
with
all,
the
not at
mushrooms.
all.
Yeah.
Not at all. And I have a lot of clients nowadays that, ask me because they hear me talk about on podcasts once in a while, like my mushroom experiences or my ayahuasca experiences. So they
Mm-hmm.
ask me, like, oh, how should I do it? Should I do this? Is this a good idea? And, I'm pretty good at giving people advice on that. Always it should be done intentionally. I accidentally did it. I did it very unintentionally. I was actually drinking that night too.
Oh, wow.
And I was like bored at a bar. I was alone and I found myself led out into this beautiful, actually not even beautiful. It was like kind of almost like a rundown area in a forest where it was beautiful at the time, but
Yeah.
it was just this little like circle in this forest that I'd never seen before behind a bar, and there were like tarps there and clothes and like bottles, and it looked like it was a place where homeless people had slept, where teenagers had parties, and I just was like literally pushed to the ground by some supernatural force. And
Wow. This is
I,
in the woods behind the bar?
this is in the woods. In Buffalo, New York. I found myself walking behind some bars into a forest I'd never seen before, just feeling led,
Wow.
like there was like a string connected to my heart and just kind of leading me.
Wow.
And I just then was kind of pushed down to the ground, and I looked up, and there were trees all around me, above me, and I just felt these waves of, I've always called them cosmic orgasms, and they were more 100 times more powerful than any physical orgasm from sex
Right.
that I had ever had. And then I see in each of the like branches of the tree, they almost like, imagine like they're like ornaments, and in each ornament is another version of me.
How many mushrooms had you eaten? Do you know?
I don't remember. I don't. This was so long ago. I really
Yeah.
don't remember. But it's some of the versions of me I could tell were from Earth, and then some of them were not from Earth. And
Wow.
from that moment, like I knew in that moment that, wow, like I am multidimensional. That it's not just me,
Yeah.
Matt. There's so much more to me. And there was no going back from that point. That was the end of my atheism, and then going into seeking. From that point forward, it was all about seeking, 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 trying to figure everything out. And then life led me through roller coasters of relationship and health things, and trying to figure out my purpose, and going from this purpose to this purpose, and all that's, not really that relevant to go into now. But that experience was just, and then another experience I'll share with psychedelics that helped me to understand, again, to solidify the idea of there being past lives and it being a real thing, was an LSD experience. This was an intentional experience. This was actually my first time ever experimenting with LSD, and I just, it was very synchronous. I happened to find myself completely alone on a Sunday night at this campground, and I just knew, okay, this is the time. Like, you have the whole campground to yourself.
Yeah.
This is your time. And on that journey, the first thing that happened was I met my guide. I met
Mm.
my I know we all have multiple guides, and we have many different angels that are working with us, but most of us tend to have one kind of main guide
Mm-hmm.
that we've known from other lifetimes, that is just in spirit form for us, now when we're in this lifetime. And I met my main guide, and then after that, it was just there were so many revelations, and one of them was, at some point I had gone into the restroom facility at this campground to, I don't know why, but I looked into the mirror, and I saw my face and my form shift into all these different other people. I saw, I'm a white male. I saw myself as a black male, as a black woman, as a Native American man, as a Native American woman, as a Chinese man, an Asian woman, as just all these different forms, and even extraterrestrial forms. And that
Wow.
was the wildest thing ever, to see my other forms right in front of me. And it was
Right.
such a humbling moment to know for sure in that moment, again, to have that confirmation that this is just a temporary form that I'm
Yeah.
inhabiting,
Yeah.
and I'm all these other people. And it's hard to, you know, have any sort of prejudice against people that are different than you, when you know you've been them and you are them,
Right.
you know?
Right.
Like, if only the world realized that this is just temporary, and the people you look at, you tip your shades up, you're like, oh, what are those people doing? They look different than me. Like, you are them, and you've been them in other
Right.
lifetimes. So it's so
Right.
silly.
Yeah. Absolutely. Wow.
But those experiences were kind of really, really relevant. And then I found, I mean, this was back before, internet, like, healers were really a thing, and before YouTube was really a big thing at all. And, to find, you remember, I'm sure, back like just 10, 12, 14 years ago, how did we really find this information? It was mainly through books, right?
Yeah.
And word of mouth. you would talk to this psychic and then she would send you this person and et cetera. And I think I found an ad for a past life regression on Craigslist. And I was
Wow.
like, okay, this sounds interesting. Let me go do this. So I went into this lady's office that she was renting, and I laid down, and like 3.5 hours went by, and it felt like 30 minutes. But I went into all these past lives, and some of them were really horrific. Seeing some really horrific deaths that I'd experienced.
Wow.
Um, but it was so cool, I'm so grateful that I did that, because it helped me to understand why I had certain fears in this lifetime.
Right.
And it's interesting to understand that your deepest fears in this life are always from past lives. Something happened, you were probably killed in a certain way in a past life, or something really difficult happened to you in a past life. The same when you have you know deformities or disabilities, or if you have serious health issues that pop up like cancer, there will be some correlation with past lives. All the major stuff, almost unequivocally, will relate to past lives, and it's absolutely fascinating.
Yeah. Right. Right. Yeah. It's really interesting to think about that. Like the person who is scared of drowning, or
The person who's
whatever.
scared of drowning absolutely probably died drowning.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah.
Right.
Like here's an example of I do you remember the movie The Perfect Storm
Yeah, I do.
from the 90s,
I do.
or 90s or early 2000s? When I saw that in a movie, and I was young, I was with my dad, I couldn't hold back my tears, when George Clooney's in the water at the end, and he's talking to his wife back home in Gloucester. And I've always had this obsession with the ocean. Like
Hmm.
I when I was a teenager, I convinced my parents for us to drive 1,200 miles from Rochester to Newfoundland several times. And my parents
Wow.
fell in love with Newfoundland. We kept going back. It's such an incredible place. In Nova Scotia, we just kept going to explore all of the Maritimes of Canada. And just everything about the cold summer air, and it's so different than like LA. It's just it's gray all the time. The sun never comes out, and it's always windy, and the barnacles on the rocks, and there's these rocky beaches with big boulders, and the smell of the fish and the fishing boats and the lobster boats. And for those people that are listening that are in New England or in the Maritimes, you know what I'm talking about. There's something
Right.
that's so wonderful about that to me. And I was in a bar in many years ago in Tucson, Arizona, and some woman that I was playing pool with had told me she was a psychic, and gave me an impromptu reading in the bar, and told me that
That
I
happened to me once too.
did it really.
With yeah, yeah,
And
with
I'm
past life
sure I
stuff too.
did that for others at some time too, and I just don't remember. It's
Right.
funny when that happens. But she told me I had a life where I died at sea. Myself and my the love of my life, the woman, had perished at sea, and she told me
Wow.
it was off the coast of California, off the coast of Big Sur, and I drove there to
Wow.
see if I could like undo the past life karma of
Mm-hmm.
like that life.
Yeah.
And I ended up having this really, really emotional experience, like almost like felt like I was reliving it, like
Wow.
on some random beach at Big Sur.
Wow.
And also it was interesting to understand from that experience that, first of all, knowing about your past lives doesn't undo the karma, and
Right.
re-experiencing it also does not undo the karma. You can't undo the karma. You can only accept the karma and then work through it in the most the most spiritually mature way possible. So
Mm.
just re-experiencing it it was interesting. It didn't really do anything for me. And I still
Yeah.
cry if I watch The Perfect Storm.
Right. Wow. Well, yeah, that's an interesting perspective because I've heard that sort of idea before of, excuse me, of, hey, if you go and you re-experience it, that sort of like alleviates it in some way, shape, or form. But you're
I don't
saying,
think it does. I don't think it does because think about the idea of the Akashic records, right?
yeah,
When something happens, it is written in the Akashic records. You cannot change the past.
yeah,
What you can do is you can change your experience of the past, and you can change the effects of the past on your present and your future. That's where our
right.
free will comes to mind. So for example, let's say someone has alcoholism in this lifetime, as so many people
Uh
do.
huh.
So there's going to be a couple of threads to that. One thread is maybe they grew up in a really difficult household. Maybe their father was an alcoholic, or their mother was an alcoholic, or maybe their father wasn't there and their mother compensated with alcohol. Maybe they grew up around alcohol everywhere, right? Maybe they never were taught to have a healthy self-esteem. Maybe their parents didn't have a healthy self-esteem. Maybe they were bullied. Maybe they were sexually abused. And, all of that can lead to addiction, right? And
Right.
alcohol just ends up being their addiction. But if we look even deeper, if we dig even deeper, we'll probably find in the past life, they were probably an alcoholic as well. And
Yeah.
that energy never got dissipated. Maybe in another lifetime, they passed away from alcoholism. They drank themselves to death. And
Right.
that energy was never fully dissipated. So for that person, if they were to do a reading with me or to do a past life regression and they saw, oh, I was an alcoholic in a past life, and I hurt all these people because I was drunk all the time, and I died because of it. It would be like a ding, ding, ding bell going on in their head, and they would be like, "Wow, I finally get it. This is
Yeah.
incredible." But at the same time, it doesn't change that it happened, and they still need to put in the work to resolve the karma. And to resolve karma, it's all about alchemy. So how alchemy goes, this is my model of reality, and how it works is, imagine I actually have a boomerang right next to me because I've been to Australia.
Hmm.
So I'm looking at the boomerang. Imagine karma is like this boomerang, right? You throw out, you do things in one lifetime that have a negative impact on yourself or others. So going against the law of one. Anytime you hurt someone else, you hurt sentient beings, you hurt yourself. I believe it's building up that negative karma. I mean, because karma itself, which is ruled by Saturn in astrology, the way I look at it is it's this self-regulating mechanism. Because without that mechanism, in the third density or the third dimension, we're not conscious enough to just choose to be loving to one another. And we can clearly see that because the world is really screwed up, right? There's
Yeah.
people dying from war right now every day. And so without that regulating mechanism of karma ruled by Saturn, it would be a free-for-all. So the
Right.
lesson of karma is that, okay, you have the free will to in one lifetime go and kill a bunch of people, or go and hurt people in any way, or hurt yourself, take yourself out. I do believe that suicide builds bad karma too. And
Yeah.
I know that I've lost people to suicide, and I've worked with many clients that have lost people to suicide, and it's absolutely devastating. And I have the absolute utmost empathy for anyone who's suicidal, because I've been suicidal many times throughout my
Yeah.
journey.
Wow.
And thank God I remember standing, I was watching this stupid movie came on last night, Canadian Bacon from like 1995. I watched it for like 5 minutes, and they were like kind of, the joking about people jumping off Niagara Falls. But I remember standing, like, I didn't find it funny because I remember standing on the ledge of Niagara Falls and just thinking. And I
Uh,
remember the park police came and be like, "Hey, are you okay?" And I just played it off like, "Oh, no, I just dropped my phone, over the
yeah.
railing." I
Oh,
was
wow.
never going to actually do it, but I know that feeling of like really
Right.
thinking about it. And I lost a friend that I'm sure he thought about it for a while, and then he just said, F it, and just did it.
Wow.
So I have such empathy for people that are in that position, and I'm sure there's people listening to this that are depressed. And just if you're still here, you're meant to be here. The soul
Right.
never, just as an aside, the soul never, in my understanding, in my research, the soul never chooses suicide. What happens is the soul creates a very difficult life plan, a very challenging life plan that will push you, the character, the incarnate being, to the absolute metaphorical edge of a cliff.
Right.
And the hope from your soul is that you will step back from the cliff and you will overcome your karmic obstacles that were set in place in your life plan without having to exit the life plan. But it doesn't always work like that. Sometimes people, it's just too painful, and I get it. And they decide to exit early, and it's fine. They have to come back, but it also does make things even more difficult in future lifetimes, because then there's more karma about self-harm that has to
Yeah.
be worked through. So,
Right.
but anyways, karma being the self-regulating mechanism, and when we create negative karma, we throw it out like a boomerang, and then it eventually comes back to us, but maybe not in this lifetime. My father, for example, he's an atheist. So I said he can't grasp this part of it, where he looks at the world and all these dirty, corrupt politicians and all these
Yeah.
killers out there, these leaders of
Yeah.
countries that are killers, and he's like, there's such bad people in the world. Why does it seem like nothing bad ever happens to them? And first of
Right.
all, we don't know that bad things aren't happening to them
Yeah.
behind the scenes that
Right.
we're not
Right.
aware of. And also, it doesn't always happen within the container of this one lifetime. If a killer like Putin, a genocidist like Putin, that soul's going to have to come back and deal with a lot of negative karma,
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
example. So it's you throw the boomerang out, the boomerang comes back, and that's the negative karma coming back on you at some point. So in the lower tiers of the third density or third dimension, while we're starting to ascend, we're just throwing this karma back and forth to each other. And we're
Right.
creating these soul contracts that are really a lot of times based off of victimhood and perpetration. Okay, I am going to do this to you so I can experience what it's like to be a bad person. You can experience what it's like to be victimized. I know that's going to build bad karma, and then in the next lifetime, we're going to switch roles. And now
Yep.
you're going to do that to me. So I understand what it's like to be victimized in that way. And you understand what it's like to be that bad person, to build up that bad karma. And then we're going to have to alchemize that. So after you've thrown the karmic boomerang back and forth like a whole number of times,
Yep.
then you get to the point as a soul where you want to really start to climb the ladder of I would call it the octaves of the third dimension of the third density, where you want to move up closer to the fourth density. And
Yeah.
to do that, you're going to now have to alchemize the karma. So how does karma get alchemized? Well, it gets alchemized by facing similar experiences, usually to a lesser degree of severity, in a subsequent lifetime, and then responding in a much more spiritually mature way. So here's like a really dark example. Maybe in one lifetime, someone said something to this random person that made them feel like they lost their honor. You know,
Mm-hmm.
they were dishonored, so they killed them. Maybe this was medieval times, and they just killed them with a sword. Well, that's not very spiritually mature, is it? Well, maybe in another lifetime, then they're going to have to be faced with ridicule. Maybe they are going to come into a life where they have some facial deformity and they're relentlessly bullied and made fun of in school. And they have to negotiate the lesson of standing up for themselves, but then also forgiveness, ultimately forgiving others, forgiving the world, and loving themselves for being different without that need to defend themselves relentlessly. That might be the alchemy, for example. The last stage of alchemy is always, how do we teach it to others?
Mm,
So, you, your partner, myself, we're all healers. So many people listening to this podcast are healers, or you will be healers if you don't feel like you're a healer now. And the things that we end up helping people the most with are the things that are on the agenda of our soul to be our service work in this lifetime. So for
right.
someone who grew up in an abusive household, they're in some way likely going to end up helping other people who grew up in an abusive household, or helping children who are in
Right.
bad households. Someone who moves through, the lessons of addiction, alcoholism, or cocaine addiction, or heroin, or whatever, and they get clean, and they step into their full power, because anyone who's on addiction is having a severe solar plexus kind of constriction. They haven't mastered that lesson of power yet. They're feeling powerless. So they help others to overcome addiction and to feel powerful. They might help women who have low self-esteem because they grew up with low self-esteem, and so on and so forth. So you throw the karmic boomerang back and forth for hundreds of lifetimes, usually on this planet. And then eventually because another aspect of it is, as a soul, you're going along. So you mentioned before, you're like, when I brought up past lives, and you're like, well, on one hand, it's past lives. On the one hand, it's parallel lives, right?
Right.
Okay. And that is true. But just like we can either look at this very moment, it's 12:22 Eastern Daylight Time, the day we're recording this, and I can say, okay, this is a moment in time, and preceding this was 12:21 and 12:20 Eastern
Right.
Daylight. Okay. Or we
It's
can
relative
say, oh,
truths, right?
correct.
It's like
Or
the
yes, or
linear is
what I'm
true
getting
too.
at. Or this moment is timeless, and everything is this moment is actually endless, right?
Yep. Yep.
Relative truths. But what I was going to say is that, as a soul, yes, you both have the experience of parallel experiences, meaning in this moment, like I saw in that mushroom trip, all these other versions of me, or I saw in that LSD trip, all the other versions of me in the mirror. There
Yeah.
are all these other versions of us in different time periods and or timelines that are doing different things. But we can also imagine that you're taking, that's like a circular or spherical, more accurately, spherical view of time. Imagine you're then intentionally taking your hands, like you're taking a ball of putty, and you're now extending and dragging out that ball of putty into a line. So now it's a linear experience. And we can say, as a soul, I came from there right before this. And before that, I came from here. And before that, I came from here. And that progression is relevant because, as a soul, if you're a star seed, you're coming from somewhere else in the galaxy, or even outside the galaxy, as a fractal. You're coming into the Earth's astral realm, and then you're agreeing to and actually wanting to experience the whole gamut of what it's like to be a third density or third dimensional Earth being, which there's a lot of exploration of darkness that comes along with that. But you're still going along a progression of ascension, where you're going to, after a while of just experiencing and just throwing the karmic boomerangs back and forth in your soul contracts, you're going to get to a point where you're going to want to start to climb up the ascension ladder. And that's when you start to plan out lifetimes where you're more alchemizing. So some lifetimes you were just experiencing. Some of them you were a bad guy, you were a pirate, or you were a killer. And then some lifetimes you were a really good person. You were someone who was out helping as many people as possible. You were a missionary or whatever. And you're going to experience all of that. But then at a certain point, the goal of the life plan starts to become alchemy. It starts to become, how in this life plan, if all goes well, how much karma can I re-experience on a lesser degree of severity to test myself if I can move through it with more a higher level of spiritual maturity, a higher vibration of choice.
Right.
And then if I can do that, I'm advancing through my spiritual lessons. And then maybe I'll come back one or two more times. And by the time you get to this point where you and I are talking, and most of the people probably listening to this podcast are probably in your ascension lifetime, as I would call it. You're in the final required lifetime in the third density or third dimension, and you're starting to make that transition towards the fourth density or fifth dimension, same thing, where you are now free of past life karma. You've worked through all of it. And this is why so many of you listening, so many people that end up working with me they're amazing light workers and healers, star seeds, yet they went through extremely traumatic childhoods. They went through extremely traumatic relationships, extremely difficult health issues. They're still going through extremely difficult health issues. The reason is because if you're one of those people, your soul has chosen this to be your ascension lifetime, and your soul wants you to work very quickly, relatively speaking, very quickly through the remaining karmic obstacles and the remaining karmic lessons, so that you can get all that cleared out and you can just step fully into your service work. Because where we're at in the astrology of the planet, the way I see it, we're 10 years into the age of Aquarius, and being that, as time goes on, we need more and more people to wake up spiritually, to move past just balancing karma and to move into conscious contribution to the whole of the planet, to the field. Because the fourth density or the fifth dimension is about the unity of all of us as former seeming just individuals. The third density is about survival. And because of that, that's why do we live from a spiritual perspective? Why do we live in a planet where it's unbelievably sad to think about not only the wars that are going on right now and the senseless killings, but that a third of the planet is starving, does not have enough food to eat. And yet we're in this country. You're in LA, I'm in New York, and there's just restaurants everywhere and there's food. And actually, no, you're in LA and there's homeless people everywhere that don't have food, right?
Right. Yep.
On Venice Beach even, right? So
all around me, yeah. I mean, I always, when I go to a restaurant, usually have some leftovers, or a lot of times, and it's like, okay, let me find someone to give.
Yeah, good.
I try and get extra food to give to.
Good. But why are, like, from a spiritual perspective, just zooming out, why are we in that? It's because we're in a third density experience and it's about survival. But as we transition up towards the fourth density or the fifth dimension, it becomes about unity. And because of that, we're stepping into the laws of abundance naturally,
right?
Because we're all consciously now feeling like we're one planetary body rather than separate people trying to fight each other for food. And of course, the Illuminati, the beings at the very top of the pyramid, that's what they want to keep us always fighting for food. And they make the systems, and they have for centuries, really millennia going back, to make it so that we're always fighting each other for food. But in the fourth density, as more of us step into that, we're stepping into legit unity consciousness where we're all, and that's why so many of us are so empathic. Like when the war in Ukraine started, it was just, I couldn't watch. And when I heard about the shooting in Buffalo the other day, which is, right near where I'm at, it's just, you feel the impact of the carnage. And as an empath, it's so difficult. It's because as empaths, we're feeling that we're in that unity consciousness already.
Yeah.
And we're the leaders that are energetically leading the pack, and others are joining every day. I keep getting new people all the time in my practice that are like, I just started waking up 6 months ago or a year ago.
Yeah.
I had a spontaneous experience, a spontaneous awakening. I started finding your YouTube videos or this guy's or this girl's, and I started waking up. I used to be Christian. Now I'm totally into this new age stuff. So that's what's really happening, is we're just very slowly, people like you and I and so many listening are really leading the way, and we're starting to become very much clear of our past life karma. It doesn't mean that you and I are necessarily, and people listening are necessarily 100% clear of that karma. Absolutely not.
Sure.
We could have other soul contracts we haven't encountered yet that still need to be worked out. We could have even negative things that happen that are based on past life karma that we just haven't gotten to that point in our life plan yet. But for the most part, when we reach this point, usually we've started to kind of moved past a lot of it, which is really cool. And that's when you
Yeah.
really feel like you're a service worker, you know?
Yeah.
Like I feel like what you and I are doing right now is legit service, you know?
Yep. Yep. Yeah, it's like that, you see the people who are deep in karmic,
Yeah.
the karmic
Yeah.
path, and it's just like they can't even do anything other than fight off all the challenges and struggles. And it doesn't mean we don't have them, but
Right.
right. I mean, compared to some, we are just beyond blessed in our,
But we are. I mean, and just think about, like, so many of us light workers listening, we're blessed enough to be born in the United States or in Canada, in a Western country where it's safer than some of the other, countries on the planet. We were blessed, a lot of us, to be born in relatively affluent. I know not all of us. A lot of us grew up in poverty, but some of us grew up in a little bit more affluent of surroundings. Because and that's all by design. It sounds so cruel and harsh, like
I know.
someone who's in a war-torn country, you're not going to want to tell them, like, oh yeah, you chose this. And
Right.
it seems egotistical, and it's not the truth. They didn't choose it. They had nothing to do with it, but their soul did,
Yeah.
for some reason or another. And it's, think about this planet in term of, another way to look at it, like, why are some people more privileged in certain ways and why are some people less privileged? Well, think about this planet in terms of it being this big, like, TV show, like the Truman Show. And
Mm-hmm.
there needs to be actors in every role. There needs to be actors who are homeless people, and there need to be actors who are billionaires, and
Yep.
everywhere in between. And so some souls have volunteered to, okay, during this time, during 2022, they're going to be in Ukraine, and
Yep.
or they're going to be in North Korea,
Yep.
and or they're going to be in one of the ghettos of the United States in extreme poverty and crime. And they, some of them may, like, there's that one lady on YouTube that escaped North Korea, right? And now she
Mm-hmm.
speaks out against the regime. God bless
Yeah.
her. But that's one person, and almost every other person in her country will end up dying there and
Yeah.
probably come back somewhere else.
Yeah.
That'll be a really difficult experience of being in poverty. And then maybe their lesson in the next lifetime will be how to be self-empowered and to build wealth, for oneself, for example.
Yeah.
But
Right.
there needs to be those volunteers, because that's the template right now. The template sucks. It absolutely sucks. Watching the news sucks. Reading the news sucks. It's rarely positive. It's been like that forever. But there is a small minority, still a small minority, of people who are completely dedicated to the spiritual advancement of this planet, and that the early awakeners are so crucial. And there were early awakeners before, like us,
Yeah.
early
For
awakeners,
sure.
like my mom, like, people in my mom's, era back in the 60s, and
Yep.
people who were at the harmonic convergence in 1986, but it was an extreme small minority back then. It's a small minority now, but every day it's growing and growing. And within 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, it just, I mean, like, look, one way to look at how quickly spirituality has grown is just look at, like, TV ads nowadays, where, like, literally every other, like, banking ad, like Citibank or Wells Fargo or whatever, or insurance, like, they're always depicting people doing yoga or Tai Chi.
Yeah.
That's like
Right.
the thing.
Totally. Yeah.
And 10,
It's all about
15
wellness.
years
Yeah.
ago, it was never like that.
Yep.
10, 15 years ago, if you did yoga or Tai Chi, you were kooky,
Yep.
right? Or if you
Right.
meditated 10 or 15 years, you were kooky. Now there's an ad for that Calm app with LeBron James, right?
Yeah.
So
Right.
it has become so much more mainstream, and that's one of the ways we can see that, okay, it is actually happening. It's just, it happens as an underground thing first, and it gets a little bit more mainstream, but there's so much pressure from the darkness. The darkness is
Yeah.
strong on this planet. Why do you think it's been in power forever? Since, I
Yeah.
believe, the beginning of this planet, right?
Yeah.
That beast, whatever you want to refer
Well, it's
that to
playing
as.
its role. It's playing its role,
Right.
and I
It,
think
it
I think
is.
that's an interesting way to look at it. Is like, if these are souls that have signed up to play a certain role, it's doing its job, you know. And if you think of some, you know, I heard someone talking about this with like a demonic force or something super dark, non-physical, and it's like, you know, it may be confused by your view of it because it's literally like reporting for duty in a sense, playing the job that it's meant.
You're
and
right.
It's an interesting way to think about it.
But yet that demon is on its own spiritual journey.
Sure.
And hopefully, I mean, eventually it will, but hopefully sooner than later, that demon finds the light. You know, it's like ghosts on this planet. You know, I mean, this is one of the wildest like things that I've experienced in my work. Is it's happened like 3 or 4 times where during a past life regression, you know, I always ask people, okay, immediately after the death, okay, you died from dysentery or you died with someone, you know, stabbing you in the heart or whatever. So what did you feel immediately after death? Did you feel angry? Did you feel vengeful? Did you feel at peace? Did you feel relieved, right? And once in a while, it's happened a few times, people see that they actually became a ghost. They did not go to the light, and they stayed for a year or 10 years or 50 years. They stayed because they were angry. It's always because they were angry and or
always tied to anger.
That they were not willing to go to the light. And a lot of times they end up waiting for someone they knew. So one example is, I remember a guy I was doing a past life regression for. He saw that he was a mob boss in some life in like the early 20th century. Relatively small time, like mob boss, drug dealer. And someone I think murdered him. And he hung around the office, like where him, you know, all the mob people would hang out every day. He just hung around there for years in just watching what was going on because he didn't want to leave his business. The most important thing in that life for him was his business, was being a mob boss. So he just hung around, and until one of his, you know, his closest compadres was murdered, and then together they realized they were both dead and decided to go to the light, and then angels came to help them into the light. Like, that's crazy, isn't it? That's stuff like that, you know, we can see in past life regressions. So it's incredible.
Yeah, it really is an interesting thing to consider, you know. Oh, I wonder if I've done that role of sticking around, you know, versus going directly
a lot
to
of us probably have. It's an interesting thing.
It's another experience, right? I mean, that's what Source is doing. Spirit is doing. It's experiencing all the angles.
Yeah, and here's another like really interesting angle or way that things can play out is that you can have lifetimes that are not even in this timeline. So you and I and everyone listening and all the people we see on the news, you know, Putin and Trump and Biden and all these people are we're in one timeline together. But I believe, and many others believe, in the existence of multiple timelines, parallel timelines. And the model, the way I would look at it is like these stacked rivers of light, just these rivers imagined on top of each other, these lines on top of each other. And you could kind of draw a vertical line that would say 2022. And if you were to visit each of these timelines, things would be slightly different. And that's where, you know, the Mandela effect thing, have you dug into that at all?
Oh, yeah.
Right. The Bernstein Bears or Looney Tunes or that that supposed you know, movie with Shazam, right? With
right. Yeah. Where you're basically potentially shifting timelines. So your past is different. What you remember is different than what the collective is remembering, and people are finding those things. And, you know, for me, I believe that is how we're navigating our realities. It's like you and I could literally be ships passing in the night where let's say right now we're having a conversation and you're like, Yeah, Brandon, we're heading to ascension. We're heading to the light. The planet is about to be turned into this utopian paradise. And I'm like, no, no, no. The exact opposite. Putin's going to drop the bomb any day. We're going to apocalypse. And I think we both could be right. And we're literally, as Bashar talks about, phasing in and out of potential timelines with our beliefs and perspectives and the vibration that we're holding. And then I end up in the apocalyptic version where there's a different Matthew John there. And you end up in the utopian one where there's a different Brandon Beecham there. And really interesting to think about.
Let's both go to the non-Putin dropping a bomb.
I'll meet you there.
Right? But that's, oh my God, I'm so glad you brought that up. That's such a fascinating topic. So the way I look at it, I really don't know for sure. Like, I don't know about any of this. Like, just to be humble,
who can say for sure, this, right? I mean, no one can say for sure.
10 years of research, and I'm going to be researching this for the however long my soul lets me live here, whether it's another year, 10 years, or 500 years. Like, this is my life's work, right? So this is what I've come up with up until now. But that idea of, like you said, Bashar talks about is of almost like splitting timelines. One of my favorite set of books and authors, the guy's name is, I'd love to plug him because I know this has got a big reach, this podcast, Todd R. Deviney, Deviney. He wrote these, really channeled through these books called Expansion for Ascending Consciousness. And in those books, these books, when I found them, I was like, oh my God, this is the greatest thing I've ever read. This is right up my alley because I'm so, like, even though I'm a psychic and intuitive, I'm so left-brained and logical. I love logic. That's why I loved math when I was growing up, But he logically explains the quantum physics of creation, of ascension, of time. And it's all channeled through from his higher self. And ultimately, really, his higher self goes all the way back to being a galaxy. And that's one of the possibilities. There's only a couple people, only 4 people I've ever come across that I see that their soul goes so far back that they're a legit galaxy. But he's one of them. And one of the concepts that he talks about is about timeline splitting, that when a large percentage of a collective chooses to go in action, imagine it creates a split, a river, a smaller branch of a river going out from the main river, creating that new timeline. And then whatever came before that now becomes locked in as reality. If we think about the Akashic Records, the perspective of the Akashic Records, like we said before, once it happens, it happens. So that becomes locked in, and then some will continue on the main path, and some will branch out maybe towards a darker path where they don't have to ascend as quickly. And that may be happening. Also, Todd talks about timelines merging, which is what, when we get right to a major ascension point, all of the alternate timelines have to come together into one. So it's like, what's an example? Like when you go to the roulette table in Vegas or whatever, and you're like, all right, well, if I just put, $50 on 14, I got 1 in, 33 chance to win. But if I put, 14, 16, 19, 20, even on, so hedging your bets. So it's almost like the planetary consciousness of Earth hedges its bets by creating multiple timelines. So basically, let's see which timeline, based on their collective free will, is able to ascend the quickest, and then those alternate timelines will start to merge into the main timeline. And that's actually kind of what I believe may be the case. And that's maybe the explanation for the Mandela effect, is all the alternate timelines that weren't ascending as quickly merging into the main one. And then maybe also, I don't know, maybe there's an alternate timeline where all the people that do believe and are more vibrationally aligned with doomsday or the apocalypse are in a separate timeline. Todd talks about, and many teachers out there talk about, the idea of an event. Have you heard people talk about this?
About what?
About the event.
like clutch moments in
No,
your.
all right, let me explain. And it sounds so ominous, but there's a lot of people in the spiritual communities who believe that there will be something like a flash of energy from our sun that is like directed from the central sun of the galaxy.
Pole shifts or something like that.
Kind of, that basically like instantly obliterates the darkness on this planet so that the light and the light workers can actually do their work. Now, I've gone back and forth over the years with this because it's very interesting. I've read a lot of books. I'm looking at like a book on my shelf right now from the 80s, Prelude to Ascension by Janet McClure. It was channeled from this alien called Vivanis, right? And in this book and all these channeled books from the 90s, they talked about the pole shifts. I don't know if you remember, they talked about the pole shifts were meant to happen between 1998 and 2001. And of course, you know, it was, if you remember back to that time, it was, you know, a little bit kind of chaotic of like, oh, what's
Y2K.
Y2K, right? But, you know, other than inspiring the plot for Office Space, nothing really significant happened at Y2K.
Which is a pretty big event, by the way.
Yeah, I know. It's one of the greatest movies of all time.
Hands down. If you haven't seen it, see it right away.
Absolutely. That and the Big Lebowski.
Oh, yeah.
LA, right?
Right.
But nothing really happened. And then, okay, after that, you know, the first decade of the 2000s, all of the channel materials were saying, okay, 2012, the end of the Mayan calendar, the beginning of the age of Aquarius. We're going to see these massive pole shifts. We're going to see cataclysms, volcanoes. It's going to be like the movie 2012, right? That the inspiration for the movie was all the theories about what's going to happen in 2012, right? Or a day after tomorrow, whatever. And nothing happened, right? I was in 2012 when, you know, the clock turned from December 21st to December 22nd, and you know, we stepped into the age of Aquarius. I was down in Mexico by the pyramids of Palenque for that. But nothing really happened. Nothing really happened. And now, okay, after that, then the next thing people were looking at was December 21st, 2020, when we had the Christmas star, when we had Jupiter and Saturn meet in the sky, right?
Right.
Like, oh my God, what's going to happen with this? Nothing. So people keep predicting things, but there is still the possibility. I trust Todd a lot. He says he saw in his, you know, QHHT, it was shown to him like a flash of light, and all this black tar was spitting out the side, and I can visualize now, was spitting out the planet, and it was all the darkness being like those souls being, basically the way he says it, is taken back to the third density somewhere else to restart their journey. And his idea is that the Milky Way galaxy itself has had this experiment of polarity, this experiment of darkness, where, well, polarity can exist anywhere, but this experiment specifically of what happens if darkness is allowed to run around and do whatever it wants without any rules, completely unencumbered. And many light workers have some subtle memories somewhere within them of the Orion Wars, including myself, of being
I've heard about this.
Right, being an extraterrestrial in Orion's belt. And the reptilians or the draconians, the same group of beings that are in charge of our planet, just went around like in Star Wars and just obliterated innocent planets and invaded innocent planets and just took people as slaves and, you know, really horrible stuff. And that the idea is that the Milky Way galaxy as a consciousness said, all right, you know, what would happen if we just allow darkness to grow like a virus uninhibited? Would it provide an impetus? Would it provide an impetus to encourage positively oriented civilizations to actually overcome the obstacle of the negative beings and ascend faster? And it turns out perhaps the experiment kind of said, well, actually, no. Actually, what happens is, like Todd says, well, wouldn't you know it, the dark beings really liked being dark. They really liked conquering and taking over others and keeping power. And it just kept growing like a virus. And the idea is that and it's not just Todd's book, there's been many channeled materials over the past 20, 30 years or longer that have hinted at or fully blatantly discussed the fact that the experiment of darkness in this galaxy or maybe in the universe is ending. And at this point, it needs to end one way or another. So the way Todd looks at it is like, okay, well, if we can't on our own, from our own spiritual evolution, overcome the darkness on the planet and actually create the utopia of the new earth in earnest, it's going to have to be done for us one way or another, because it's been a decision made by the Milky Way galaxy that this is the end of darkness. I've gone back and forth, and I'd love to hear what you think in a second, but I've gone back and forth with this over the years, and I'm at the point now, and again, I don't know, these are just my ideas. I do believe that we're getting close to that like deadline, the drop dead point of the end of darkness in this galaxy. I don't think though we're there quite yet, and I think we may have even hundreds of years to go before that drop dead point would be reached. And I believe that the higher councils of light and maybe the galaxy herself is looking at Earth as one of the more important planets in the galaxy to see, well, how quickly are they doing it on their own? Because I believe right now we have almost zero assistance. I am kind of optimistically believing in the channel materials that say nuclear wars are prohibited on this planet because that's how Atlantis ended. And when a nuclear bomb is detonated, it supposedly has
goes out.
Exactly, it has echoing effects because of the atomic nature of it, that it's actually cutting through like space-time, and it's having reverberations throughout the galaxy. But at the same time, if that's true, then why is North Korea and why have the U.S. been allowed to?
Well, we've also seen them get taken offline by UFO ships at times.
I remember hearing that on Coast to Coast Radio years ago.
It's crazy, yeah.
And I believe that. So I optimistically believe like that may be the only help we have, is that they will make sure the positive extraterrestrials that are helping will make sure that there's no nuclear war, hopefully, because without that, we might be in serious trouble right now with what's going on. And
those stories are pretty crazy that where they're taken offline. Like, you can hear even the recordings from you're this high security.
Yeah, do you have a specific example of that? I remember hearing that Coast to Coast. I don't remember. I remember
I'd have to
or something. I don't know.
It may be the Rendlesham Forest one. It's been a minute since that's coming up off the top of my head. That might be the one. I could look it up and find out for sure. But
no worries. Anyways, the point being that I believe that that's the only bumpers in the metaphorical bowling lane that we have. And other than that, we're completely left on our own right now to try to figure this out ourselves. If we weren't completely left on our own, why would Ukraine be happening right now? Why would the poverty that's happening on this planet be getting worse and worse and worse? During the pandemic, the level of poverty on this planet exploded, and the gap between the super wealthy and the poor got way worse than before it. What
I would say to this idea of this galaxy sort of eliminating darkness, my thoughts and theory on all of that is it's possible. If so, let's say it's true and this will become of no darkness, all shadow is sort of knocked out in this particular galaxy, then my belief would be, and there will be others where that is not the case, and souls would come here when they're meant to have an extremely light experience. But from the grandest perspective, and it all being one, I don't think you'll ever fully get rid of the shadow, because like any great work of art, you'll never see a great work of art without shadow in it. And I believe it is a tool for source, God, higher self, the universe, love, all these words are synonymous, to exist. Without the darkness, you can't
Right.
really know the underlying meaning and heart of it all, which is love.
Correct.
So I believe that, you may have a pocket where it's one way or the other, and that may be a big pocket as big as a galaxy,
So,
right? But
yes,
ultimately,
yes.
that tool is necessary and will always be there, at least in the realms of duality, in which case, like, okay, I've had enough of that experience. Now let's go to the all love, dimension, et cetera.
You know what?
And
I love that perspective, and that very well may be the truth. I believe personally, and I really appreciate you sharing that. I believe personally that there are other galaxies where there is no darkness. And like Todd says, there's actually galaxies where the planets don't even move. The objects are actually stationary. That, for example, here in our galaxy, the movement, the idea of space-time means that time is predicated off of space, and time, the experience of time is predicated off of movement. So the reason that we experience time on this planet is because our planet is physically moving in reference to other objects, and other objects are moving around us, and that's how we have an astrological template. But there's other galaxies where there is no movement, and there literally is no experience of time at all. And there's galaxies that are just positive. In book one, Expansion for Ascending Consciousness, there's this great model. It's an Ankh, and it shows the ascension through the first and second densities, which would be the plant and animal kingdoms. And then once you get to the third, fourth, and fifth densities, you get to the Ankh part. One side of the Ankh is going to be negative polarity, and then one side of the Ankh is going to be positive polarity. And you can go either direction through the third, fourth, and fifth densities. For example, we could look at the dark extraterrestrials as being fifth density beings, which means they've reached, the level where they can teleport and they can, do things, amazing things psychically, and they have incredible technology that we don't have in the third density. They can be invisible or whatever, but it doesn't mean they're good. They can do that and do it for evil, and yet they're still in the fifth density. But then it merges back at the top of the Ankh. It merges back into one, and that's the sixth density. So the sixth density is the level where the merging between light and dark has happened, and the duality experience is over, right? Yeah. So I love that model, and it makes a lot of sense to me.
Me too.
But it may be that, Todd says that this is the only galaxy where there's darkness. Some people say that, some people say differently. I don't know. I have no idea. I've always, I talk about this with friends and clients a lot. It seems peculiar that why would we be the only galaxy in all of creation to be dark?
And once again, okay, then another universe is fully dark. I mean,
exactly.
I would say
there could be other universes. Exactly.
Right. How big is the board?
Exactly. But you're right. In the context, in the envelope of polarity, the darkness is crucial, because the darkness is the contrast. And just, real briefly, because I know we had really intended to talk more about past lives, and I ended up going on a bit of a tangent into more galactic affairs, right?
But happens.
That idea of contrast is so important when it comes to the life plan. And as an incarnate being, you're going to reincarnate hundreds and hundreds of times on this planet or more, and you're going to want to experience metaphorically different colors and different shades of colors in each lifetime. So that's why you're going to be different, people that look different. You're going to be tall, you're going to be short, you're going to be rich, you're going to be poor, you're going to be strong and healthy, you're going to be weak or disabled. You're going to, be born into a wealthy family. You're going to be born into poverty. You're going to have 12 brothers and sisters in one lifetime. You're going to have, be an only child like I am in another lifetime. So you're going to experience those shades, that contrast. Imagine like every shade of the color spectrum from hot to cold. You're going to want to experience metaphorically as a soul in the physical vessel. And that contrast, experiencing the contrast, is how you actually evolve. So, for example, if you grow up around, we talked about addiction before, if you grow up around addiction, if you grow up in a household with alcoholism or with crack addiction or whatever, and you see that contrast and you see the pain and the darkness that addiction causes in your family, hopefully through the experience of that contrast, it will eventually lead you on a path to sobriety. And then the alchemy part is being on that, in that sober place, and being, much more whole and healthy than your family was. You can then, in whatever way, whether it's through your meetup groups, or whether it's through your work, or just, talking to people, just one-on-one, you're going to help others to move through addiction and to the other side. And then they'll also go out and help others. And that's how that positivity spreads, right? Like the name of your
Right.
podcast, Positive Head. But that contrast is so important in the planning. So if you think about a real easy way, just maybe we'll leave people off with this, to think about your life plan, and really, if you want to really deeply go into your life plan, I hope you don't mind, Brandon, if I say I'm one of the best people to talk to about this. My soul plan readings, I get visions, I'm shown what happened in other lifetimes, I'm shown a model
Cool.
of your life plan. I will hear sometimes the kind of the dialogue between souls up in the astral plane, as to why this certain thing is in the soul contract. I'll see, like, as an actual contract, what the soul contract looks like. And also I do past life regression sessions to supplement that, where you for yourself can actually go and experience and, see firsthand, like literally in a past life regression, you're going to feel that you're in the shoes of a different person, and you're walking as that person, and you're experiencing life as that person. You're going to experience the emotions of that person. You're going to experience the death of that person, which is kind of scary to think about, but really it's
Yeah.
actually not. And once you see yourself die in a past life regression, I swear to God, your fear of death will go down significantly, because you'll
Yeah.
realize that, oh my God, reincarnation is real, and I really never actually die. These are just temporary forms. But if you don't end up working with me or whatever, just read those books, read Journey of Souls, read Your Soul's Plan and Your Soul's Gift by Robert Schwartz, absolutely. But and he explains this, much more in depth than I have time to now. But just look at what you've had to learn. So if you were to make a list right now on a piece of paper of all of the most important pieces of wisdom that you've learned in your life, and then you
Mm-hmm.
trace the origins of those pieces of wisdom to some difficult experiences that either you went through directly or people around you went through. And
Mm-hmm.
that's a great way to know what your soul put in your life plan, because the point of it is the wisdom. The point of it is the spiritual maturity. The point of it is the alchemy, which you then go out and teach others and spread like a positive virus, that positivity and that healing energy. So just
Yeah.
look at what were those most significant relationships, accidents, illnesses, experiences that ended up giving you the most significant, and not just negative stuff, the positive stuff too. The
Sure.
really amazing experiences, and the plant medicine journeys and the travel and the relationship. All of the most significant things are almost always going to be in your life plan, so you can eventually get to that wisdom and alchemy at some point. So that's a really good way to look at things. It's very rare that something very negative would not be in your life plan. It is perhaps
Yeah.
possible. It is perhaps
Yeah.
possible that things can kind of go not as planned. Some free will being can just become dark on their own volition and harm others. It's possible. But for the most part, all of the bad stuff that happened, it happened to get you to a specific piece of wisdom that is fully integrated into your being, and then you're embodying to the world.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I always say life is happening for you, not to you. And
Yeah,
once you get that,
yes, that's the most
one-
simplistic like sentence. I love that. Thank you to put what I just talked about into.
yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, this has been awesome. I feel like Matthew, we could go for many
Oh my
hours, and
God.
maybe we'll do
Exactly.
another
Yeah.
one sometime.
I
You
would
have a
love to. Yeah.
lot of interesting thoughts and perspectives to share, and for those who want to continue to follow you in your work, and I know you have
Yeah. Yeah.
some workshops and things coming up. Maybe you can talk a little bit about that.
Absolutely. Well, if you want to find all of my work, my website is youaradivinehuman.org. youaradivinehuman.org. Don't forget that A. Or you can just Google me, Matthew John, and I come up at the top of the Google results. But if you look on my website, you can see all of my private sessions. I do all sorts of really interesting stuff. As I said, I do the soul plan readings. I do the past life regressions. I do starseed discovery sessions. We talked a little bit about starseeds in this podcast, where What I do is, first of all, we'll have a little chat about what a starseed is. I'll share a lot more information than I had time to today on what starseeds actually are. And then
Mm,
I'll put you under hypnosis. And this is all, I do all my work remotely, by the way. I've worked with people from
cool.
like 60 countries, and I hope to work with
Wow.
people from every single country on the planet, before I'm done. But wherever you are, we'll find a way to meet, whether it's Zoom or phone or whatever. But in the starseed sessions, I'll lead you on a hypnosis astral journey to your home planet. It's one of the most incredible experiences you can have. People usually cry. They usually
Wow.
don't want to leave. They don't want to come back. They don't want the session to be over. The number one thing people say is like, I've never felt more at home ever than being on my home planet and actually being with my true galactic family. It's kind of like a bucket list experience. I think the past
Yeah.
life regression is also a bucket list experience. It just isn't always as positive. Be
Yeah.
prepared. Sometimes people go to all negative lifetimes. Sometimes people we try to go to 2 or 3 if we have time. Sometimes people go to 1 positive, 1 negative lifetime. There's a lot of us, a lot of you listening have had like lifetimes in Atlantis or Lemuria where you were like a powerful wizard or a powerful leader in some way. And it's really cool to see those lifetimes too, because then you
Yeah.
can really kind of feel that sense of empowerment and those skills that you had. And you can see how they're actually developed. Like for me, I was, in Lemuria as a wizard. And
Cool.
like so much of what what I was able to do back in Lemuria, I've started to develop over the past decade in this lifetime. I do that. I do angel energy healing sessions. They're really powerful energy healing sessions where we work on your chakras and your aura, working with a team of angelic beings. I love working with angels. We do physical healing as well to help with physical issues. I do medical and really powerful medical intuitive work. I can look at inside your body, look at your organs, look at your blood, look at everything that's going on in your body and related to what happened in other lifetimes, related to this lifetime. Then also put together a plan for you as far as supplements and diet. I do a future self regression as well, which is another type of regression session, but this
Cool.
is a regression into your future, right? And I have packages where I do all of that. But what I want to do is offer to Positive Head listeners only 20% off any of my private sessions on my website. So I want you to use the coupon code PositiveHead20 at checkout. PositiveHead20
Cool.
at checkout for 20% off any private session. And I'll leave that up. There'll be no expiration date on that. If people, find this and they find
Sweet.
the coupon code, you can use it. I also have all sorts of recorded courses and webinars for people if a private session won't work for you. And I'm doing a tarot course right now. The tarot is another one of my passions. I've been working with the tarot for over a decade, and I absolutely love teaching it. I'm teaching a 13-week comprehensive tarot reading course, and the next live class is going to be on Saturday, June 4th. All the classes are at 5 o'clock New York time, 2 o'clock LA time on Saturdays. And you don't have to join live. It's fun to join live because we have a great group. When we go back and forth, we go in depth in every card. It is not just me saying this, but I've been told by others. It is the best tarot course out there on the internet because it's so comprehensive. It's over 37 hours of live instruction. You get a free reading with me. You get a certificate of completion at the end, where there's a Q&A at the end of each call. And I absolutely will take you from whether you've never touched the cards ever, or you're beginner, or you're intermediate, to by the end of the course being able to proficiently read for yourself and for others. And the tarot is a lifelong friend. People ask me like, why does the course have to be so long? Well, it's because the tarot is incredibly complex. It is a very difficult thing to learn and to master. I've been reading it for over a decade, and I'm still working on mastering it. As I teach, it helps me to master it. So the course is great.
We teach best what we most need to learn.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, and I'm very active on Instagram as well. That's my main social media platform besides YouTube. So it's at Matthew John Healer on Instagram, at Matthew John Healer.
Got it. I've done a few hypnotherapy, maybe twice, past life regression things that I don't really feel like I necessarily tapped in, so I'd be curious.
Why don't we do one? Why don't we do one?
Yeah, it could be interesting.
Yeah.
Then we could report back how it goes to the people,
Absolutely.
So yeah,
that's an interesting point, actually, Brandon, if we have a second, because a lot of people when they purchase one of my past life regressions or starseed sessions, or they contact me and they're asking me questions about it, they're like, well, I've tried before and it didn't
Yeah.
really work. I've tried the guided
Yep.
meditations, or I've tried with this
Yep.
one person. Look, I'll be very honest, there is a very small minority of people that cannot be regressed. It is an extremely small minority. I've only come across a handful in my work, and when it happens, and I end up just doing a reading for them. But over 99% of people, you
Interesting.
can be regressed. It just sometimes you need to be regressed in a different way. And the great thing about me is I've been doing past life regressions for over a decade. So I'm very experienced with working with people's psyches and their subconscious minds to, okay, if one method isn't working, then I pivot to another method. If that doesn't work, I pivot to another method. And there's been times, some of the best past life regressions I've ever had with clients were when the client was starting to get really frustrated. It hadn't worked before, it's not working now. And I just very calmly, I'm just, all right, you know what? If it's okay, let's just try one more time. Take a deep breath, take a glass of water. Let's go back in just one more time. You paid for this, why not? Just one more time. And I try something slightly different, and then they have the most vivid regression ever. And they're so thankful at the end. They're like, oh my God, thank you for pushing me a little bit, to keep trying. The majority of people, it's very smooth. They're very easily regressible. And it's a smooth journey. I record it for you so you have it, to listen to, because you're not always going to remember. If you're truly regressed into hypnosis, you will not remember a lot of it. You'll remember bits and pieces. If you're kind of half awake, you'll remember more of it. And even if you're half awake, it can still work. But if it's not smooth, I have so many methods to work around your specific subconscious mind that for the vast majority of people, you'll be able to do it.
Cool. All right. Well, I'm open to. It's been many years since I've tried, so
I would be honored to. I would be honored to. Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. All right. Well, we'll keep you posted on that, everyone. And I do have one final question for you here. My cliche closer.
Okay.
And
I can't wait, because the first question was great. I've never been asked that, and you didn't tell me in advance. Just so people know. Right. Like I just had to respond. A little caught off guard, but I love the question. So I'm excited for this.
Yeah. All right. The cliche closer is this: in 60 seconds or less, what is the meaning of life according to Matthew John?
Wow. Okay. Oh my God. So the meaning of life, I believe, is to evolve. So the way I look at it is from the perspective of ascension. We start as a single photon of light somewhere. If you're an earth seed, you start as a single photon of light on this planet. If you're a star seed, you start as a single photon of light somewhere else. And then you start to develop more and more photons around you until you develop a rotation, until you develop a toroidal field, and that field grows and grows. And the physical manifestation of that is becoming, first plant groups, and then individual plants, perhaps with higher consciousness, and then animals of increasingly complex levels of brain chemistry, of complexities of brain chemistry. And then you become a third density humanoid being, and then you keep going up into becoming fourth density and becoming unified. And ultimately, the goal of life is evolution and ascension, to go all the way from a brand new soul all the way up to eventually being an entire freaking galaxy and being in charge of creating star systems just out of pleasure and love for creation.
Beautiful. That is quite, I love that. You're starting as a photon and then growing from there. That's, I've never heard that.
Yeah, maybe a different perspective on it, but I'm a Virgo moon, so I think of things again very logically, mathematically, left-brained, and I like to explain them that way. But if you put it into a more practical application, the point of life is to always evolve, to become better than you were a day ago, a week ago, a month ago, a year ago.
Yeah. Very, very cool. Well, this has been quite a trip. Matthew, thank you for sharing and connecting on today's episode. And absolutely. And all of you out there for tuning your beautiful brainwaves and incredible hearts into another episode. Until next time, journey well. Also, before we sign off, I wanted to remind you to download the Golden Key audio or ebook as my free gift to you at goldenkey.gift using the Golden Key code POSITIVEHEAD. And please, if you enjoy my gift, leave a positive review on Amazon so others can find the book and unlock their lives with the help of the Golden Key as well.